Hi, everybody. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on penetration testing and making sure you guys are safe from cyber attacks, or at least safe as you can be. We are going to kick things off so that way we have plenty of time for questions and everything. So if you could, please move to the next slide, please. So hey, please, okay, there we go. Okay, so just wanted to do a couple introductions about who we are and who's going to be speaking today. My name is Nick. I'm the sales manager here at AlphaBOLD, and we are going to be joined by our practice lead for QA, which is Zohaib, and he's got a ton of experience, as you can see there, just in the kind of manual and automation testing. And then we're also joined by Zirak, who is our senior QA engineer, and he's actually going to be taking us through a demo today as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how cybersecurity works and how easily it is to crack cybersecurity and hack into a system. I'm really excited to show you guys. So next slide, please. Yeah, a little bit about what's going on today. So we are going to jump right into the demo to give you guys perspective on how easy it is to be attacked. And then we're going to dive into why we need cyber penetration testing, and then look at how the global security, I mean, you see it in the news all over the place. People are getting ransomware attacks, malware attacks all over. So we're going to kind of look at how it's affecting businesses across the world. Then we're going to look into the technical vulnerabilities and how to prevent any kind of attack, and then what kind of steps are involved with penetration testing. And then we'll kind of look at the different levels of attacks that can happen. So next slide, please. A little bit more about who we are as a company. We are AlphaBOLD. We are a bunch of bold enthusiasts. So we really just love technology and learning about new technologies and how to apply them to different businesses and help our clients out. As you can see on the top there, we have a bunch of different practices. This one specifically for today's webinar is the QA, but we also have DevOps. We are a Microsoft Dynamics partner for CRM and customer engagement. We do ERP work, Office 365, Azure, AI, IoT. We do a whole bunch of stuff, and we really like to tie them all together to become a full solution provider. And then how we do stuff here is either ad hoc consulting, development. We do solution optimization, integrations, and then just business process optimizations. And then at the bottom, you'll see what we call is our bold route, and it's our methodology for helping clients out. So we do at the beginning stages of different projects, we do a blueprint where we work with our clients to design pretty much a project plan, and that's why it's called a blueprint. And then it gives our clients full visibility into what we're doing, the level of effort involved. Then move into orchestrate, where we pretty much do what we said we were going to do. We go through the plan and implement it. Then we do a train the trainer model, which is our lead section, where we want our customers and our clients to understand exactly what's going on in their system and know how to operate it themselves, and then go in and try to break it with the UAT. And then we really pride ourselves on our post-go live deployment support. So we want to make sure what we do for our clients is successful, and we don't want to just throw you some products and then leave. We want long-term partnerships, and that's where our support comes from. So next slide, please. This is a little bit more about us, gives you a little bit more details of who we are. We have 80 full-time resources here. And I think within our QA department, we're roughly around 10, and we are growing rapidly as we speak. And our practice managers and project managers have a ton of experience within whatever industry they are the lead on. And then again, support is a big thing with us. We want to make sure we are that full solution provider. So we do everything from development to testing, implementation, and then the support afterwards. We think visibility is a big factor for our clientele because we want to build trust. We want not only our customers to feel comfortable with the product, but comfortable with us and know that we are working in their best interest. And then top part, scalability and flexibility. we work with our clients to make sure they're growing, and we want to grow with you because your success is our success. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's a bunch of industries we've served. You'll see it ranges wildly, but what that really helps us do is become a more well-rounded provider because we can use our experience in different industries and adapt them to the industry that you're currently in to make the best fit and make sure things are optimized for you. Next slide, please. Here's some of our happy customers. So we work with, like you saw in the last slide, a whole bunch of different people, and they all seem really happy with us. So we want to keep them happy, and that's our main goal. Next slide, please. All right, so this is where I'm going to hand it off. We're going to jump straight into a demonstration so you guys can kind of see what we're talking about today and get a good base layer of why we need pen testing. But before I do, I just want you guys to know you can ask questions at any time. Please just put them in the questions box, and I'll bring them up throughout the presentation, and we'll try to get those answered as best as possible for you. If we can't, then we will email you afterwards with our findings. But for now, I will stop talking, and I will hand it off to Zirak. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Hello, guys. Thanks for joining. So firstly, we'll be showing you a demo by breaking the application login credentials. So we will be performing an SQL injection attack on a user input field, and by exploiting the error URL, we are going to crack the login credentials of applications. So we'll be using a practice application, which is DBWA, because it's a practice application and we cannot perform this activity on a legitimate website, because doing so itself is a cybercrime. So tools we will be using are Kali Linux, Burpsuit, and SQL Map. So let's begin the demo. Next slide, please. So here we have this practice application, and suppose I am a hacker, right? And I have this application right in front of me. And suppose I have one input field, which I will be showing you in a moment. Yeah, so we have this input field, and I'm a hacker. I'm going to input single code just to check if it's vulnerable to SQL injection or not. Here you can see it's prone to SQL injection. So because it has shown us the error URL, and because the exception handling was not done properly on the backend. So we'll be going to exploit it. I'm going to write some SQL commands on a tool, and I'll be breaking to the application login credentials. So what I need to do as a hacker, I need to first gather my information to write my first query. So firstly, I'll be extracting the database names, then I'll be extracting the tables which are available on that particular database, and afterwards I'll be extracting the column names. So here is the session ID which we have intercepted. So I'm going to write my first command, and I'm using the session ID and input in my command to extract the database information, database name basically, which is hosted on the server. So I simply just copy and paste this session ID in my command. This ID, I'll just copy it and paste it in my command. So this is the first part of the query I'm done with. Now, secondly, I have to, input the session ID as well, which I intercepted using a tool. So I'm going to, copy and paste the session ID as well, because here is the intercepted request, and then just copy the session ID. And paste right here in my command. And firstly, I'll be, extracting the database name which is hosted on the server. So I'll add a switch of DBABS and execute the command. Gone through the information message, we bypass it, and there you go. So here you can see where we have, these databases hosted on the server. So now area of interest is our DBWA database. Now I'm going to further modify my command and going to, extract the database information by, going to extract the table names which are available on this DBW application. So I'm further modifying my command and add a new switch to extract the table names which are available against DBW application. And upon execution, here you can see we have 2 tables available in DBW application. So users is the tables normally in which credentials usually stored. So this is our area of interest. So now I'm going to further modify my command and trying to extract the column names which are available against the users table. So I'll add a new switch in my command and execute it to extract the column names. Executing, there you go. Here we have the column names which are available against that table. Now users, password, and user ID, these 3 tables is our area of interest. Now we are going to extract the actual data and their encrypted value which are available against all these 3 columns. Now I'm going to further modify my command and finally breaking through the login credentials which are available against these 3 columns. So I'll modify my command and add these 3 table names and add a switch to extract by passing the information message. So here we are finally, passing through the launching a dictionary-based attack to extract the actual data, the actual login credentials. So there you go. So we have finally cracked the login credentials. So these are the login credentials which are users which are available on this DBW application. I'm going to log in with the first user. So simply I enter the username and password which we extracted and hit the login button and see what happens. Username as admin and password as password. Just for your confirmation, I'm also going to show you that what's the actual value of password I've entered. So it's the same value which we cracked through our SQL query. So I hit login. There you go. Here we are in the application. Here we have cracked an application. So I'm going to further test this user credentials. So I'm logging with another user. Let's suppose for the 3rd row, its user is 1337, and I'll input this username 1337 and password. Again, I'm going to show you the value which I entered is the password field. So there you go. Here you can see that actual value Charlie, and here we are logging with the 2nd user again. So there we are. Here it's so easy that someone can simply exploit your application if error handling is not done properly. So I'm going to now request Zohaib Farhan to proceed further and going us through the need of penetration testing and actual vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Hello everyone. So I am Zohaib Farhan and I would continue this webinar with the ticker that why we need penetration testing at all. As you know that in today's environment, user can easily interfere with any piece of data that is transmitted between the client and the server. The communication is through some medium. So by capturing that medium and polluting the data with the wrong intentions can cause a lot more damage than one can imagine. Similarly, as the communication is in the form of some requests and responses, so user can alter the sequence of those requests as well as the parameter at different stages other than the application expects. Sometimes no restrictions are present for a user to use only a web browser to access the application. To resolve these core problems, we make a good use of penetration testing. Addition to that, we must identify that all the causes of vulnerabilities, and these can only be achieved by conducting a security testing. Vulnerabilities can be result of improper computer, security configurations, or programming errors, you can say. If left unaddressed, the vulnerabilities create security holes which are very easy for cyber criminals to exploit. Now let's talk about like what is the major setback of this. One major setback of this advancement in the IT sector is the ease of access for IT equipments. Like on average, that is said to like 5,000 to 7,000 new computer security threats are announced each year. So the penetration testing helps us in focusing on those specific threats and prioritizing our defenses. So any questions till now, Nick?
Let's check in on the question board. Yeah, we did. So how does penetration testing differ from security testing?
Okay, this is a very good question. So let's suppose I give it an example of that. Security testing mostly refers to a software functionality and its behavior, how the program behaves in the presence of attack when the software launched into use. And if a leakage of information occurs, how it mirrors with major principles of security that could be confidentiality, integrity, authentication, which can be like including the availability and authorization. While the penetration testing, or we call it as a pen test, that refers to the POA, that means point of access, identification of the weaknesses in the network, such as you can say ports, firewalls, servers, routers, switches, internal and web application, mobile devices. Pen test is usually automated process able to identify vulnerabilities given a gateway to the potentially exploited, which are by the hackers. So
Gotcha.
are we good
Thank
now?
you, sir. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now let's talk about some statistics related to the cyber attacks. So here are different like statements covered by different companies. So it is said that 2/3 of all the attacks on the web applications involve SQL injection. Same has been demonstrated by Zirek in his demo. So similarly, cyber attacks on the web application increased by 52% in 2019. During this pandemic, unfortunate situation, COVID-19, phishing attacks has been increased from 667% in 1 month only. So ZNet recounted that cyber attacks against banks rose by 238%. 43% of the data breaches in 2020 occurred through cloud-based web applications. So these are some of the alarming stats that unfortunately, during the period of pandemic that is happening, and that heightens the importance of web penetration testing. So because of all these cyber attacks, now it's the time to analyze how much business is impacted. So here are some of the stats which I have covered, and I have given the references at the end of the statements. So you can visit those and verify those. That 43% of the cyber attacks target small businesses. This is reported. And you know that small businesses are more vulnerable to these sort of things, so they don't protect themselves from these attacks. Across small businesses, the average cost of data breach is $3.9 million. For prevention from those security threats, it is expected that $6 trillion will be spent globally on cybersecurity by 2021. Potentially of the cybersecurity can be gauged from the point that it is estimated that count of connected IoT devices to be around 75 billion by 2025. So this is the projection that has been presented. Because of this vast growth, that has been said that more than 77% of the organizations do not have the cybersecurity incident response plan prepared within them to cope up with these type of situations. Research work that has been conducted that present that whenever any data breach occurs, even the major ones, it takes nearly 6 months for those companies on average to detect that. So when they take time to detect that, you can imagine the amount of loss that has been created for that company. It means that if companies of any scale are not well prepared or protected in advance against the security threats, then the loss caused by these threats are inevitable, and even the existence of small businesses would be at stake. So now in next slide, we will be talking about some of the examples. So our first example is for the cyber attack, that is a whaling attack, you can say, that happened for FACC, which is an Australian airplane component manufacturers. This attack is a method used by cyber criminals to trick as a senior player at the organization and directly targeting the senior management or the directors of that organization or other important individuals with aim of stealing money or sensitive information or gaining access to their computer systems for criminal purposes. Also known as CEO fraud, whaling is similar to phishing in that it uses methods such as emails and website spoofing to trick a target into performing specific actions such as revealing sensitive data or transfer of money. The next example is for Mendeley's International, where an encrypting malware attack occurred. Basically, this is the form of malware that encrypts a victim's files. The attackers then demands a ransom from the victim to restore access to that data upon the payment. Without the payment, they will not be restoring the access, so they can play with the data and do any kind of things. Now, having said this,
Oh, and
let's.
Zohaib,
Yes,
can I
sorry.
jump in real quick?
So, yes, you can.
All right, great. I love polls, and I haven't got to launch a poll in a little while since my last webinar, so I need to get one in here. So I'd like to just ask everybody in attendance today, after kind of seeing how easy it was to crack a website, as well as seeing all the different examples and statistics as far as all the different attacks that are going on, how secure do you think your applications are? How secure is your website? We would love to kind of get a sense for what you think, how you think you're sitting right now. All right, getting some answers in. Awesome. So we do have a couple of people saying not secure. So we need to talk. We do have some people say, the majority of people actually now saying secure to a certain extent, which is better than completely not secure. So that's good. And then we do have a couple of people at the highly secure point. Gonna leave this open for another 4 seconds here. Get the last of the votes in. All right, thank you guys very much for your responses. I do have another one coming up. And if you don't feel like your applications are secure, what do you think will help with raising that security level? Is it periodic penetration testing, just advanced security technology, or just you need to know more about what tools are out there or what's being developed to make your systems more secure? Okay, so looks like the majority of you are saying advanced security technology, with a runner-up being better security awareness in implementation or development. Good to know. And then we got a couple people looking at the periodic pen testing. So we'll leave this open for a few more seconds. All right. Thank you again for your feedback. And I do have one more poll. This is my last question to you guys, I promise. All right, let's launch this. So if you do already have pen testing going on, how often are you actually conducting these penetration tests? It's a mouthful. Are you just never doing it? Occasionally, or is it once a year, twice a year? We don't normally see people doing it more than twice a year, I believe. But if you're doing it more than twice a year, just put twice a year there. We do, looks like we have quite a few people saying never, okay? And then we have the majority of people saying occasionally, so that's good to see. And then a couple of people saying twice a year. Awesome. We will leave this open for 3 more seconds. And all right, great. Thank you everybody for your feedback. We do appreciate it, and it does help us kind of curate these webinars in the future so it can be a little bit more relevant for you. That's it for me. I will hand it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Nick. That was really quick, and I hope that people have commented and shared their experience with pen testing till now. So, having conducted that poll, now let's talk a little bit about the technical security vulnerabilities. Here are major types of them as broken authentication, broken access control, SQL injection, for which the demonstration has already been given. Then there is one that is called as cross-site scripting, information leakage, cross-site request forgery. We will be discussing them one by one by defining them at first and then some tips to prevent them. So, all right, first in the list is broken authentication. Thus, authentication is basically broken when the attackers can compromise the secrets due to the poor design and implementation of identity and access controls. These secrets are passwords, keys, session tokens, user accounts, information, or any other detail that help to assume user identities. By talking some simple measures, by talking and taking some simple measures into account, we can prevent broken authentication that act as an entry point for most of the attackers and cyber criminals and an easy go for them. These measures are like you can say making it required for the user to provide 2 or more verification factors to gain access to a resource such as application, online account, or even a VPN. This is known as multi-factor authentication, and lot of people from your side would be knowing that it has already been implemented by for major mobile apps and major web applications as well. Do not ever deploy or ship the product with default credentials. The example of this is usually that the code is deployed to the production with the default credentials like admin or password, just that has been demonstrated in the demo as well. So do not ever do that, because that is very, very easily guessable for the cyber criminals. So legitimate password policy must be implemented to tighten the door for potential threat entrants. You can say that some should be in the caps, some should be the special characters or numeric combination. These are very well known, and those standards are known for some reason. So next one is clean the URL from any session IDs and invalidate them after the logout. Limiting the failed login attempts for certain time or number would add a security layer on the entry point of the application. That has not been implemented by the banking applications. Now, a second type of vulnerability in the list is broken access control. So this exists when a user can in fact access some resources or perform certain actions that they are not supposed to be able to access or perform. Impact of this problem allows attackers to view unauthorized content. They can perform, create, read, update, or delete the operation on the content, or even execute some unauthorized functions, worst for which is taking over as a site administrator. We can say that a user has been on the web application for some particular area or for particular module, but you can say that the cyber criminal can create in a way that user can access the configuration module of that application and they can play with it. Now let's talk about preventing the broken access control. Here again, there are certain steps which, if taken care properly, can help us in preventing the broken access control. As a security best practice, it is recommended to disable directory listing. we can disable directory listing by creating an empty index file in the relevant directory. Though in many cases this is not the best practice, we can implement a permanent and secure solution by disabling directory listing on a web server level. Apart from public resources, we can implement deny by default, and model access control should enforce record ownership. Rather than accepting that user can create, read, update, or delete any record, there should be some benchmarks. Backup files should not be present within the web routes because these are very common paths and cyber criminals can look up to those to get their exact need of the data. We should log access control failures, alter admin when repeated failures occurs. So this is our very own, as you have seen in the demonstration, an SQL injection attack consists of the insertion or technically injection of a SQL query via the input data from the client to the application. A successful SQL injection exploit can read sensitive data from the databases, just like it read the username and password and use that to log in into the application, modify it, and execute administrative operations such as shut down the DBMS and shut down the whole system which has been developed for over the years. This can be prevented through multiple ways. First, input validation makes sure it is the accepted type, length, format, or so on. Only the value which passes the validation can be processed. Secondly, the user input is automatically coded and the supplied input will not cause the change of the intent. So this coding style helps mitigating an SQL injection attack. Third, use parameterized store procedures with embedded parameters. Fourth one, we can say always use character escaping functions for user supplied inputs. Fifth one in the list is a web application firewall operating in front of the web servers monitors the traffic which goes in and out of the web server and identifies patterns that constitute a threat. By analyzing these patterns, we can say that this traffic caused the threat to the application and we can avoid or we can enable firewall and add that kind of navigation in that.
Hey, Zohaib, we did
Yes.
have a question come in. Question is there any way to continuously see the log accesses?
I'm sorry, can you repeat, please?
Is there any way or is there anywhere to see the log access, the continuous log access? I think that's the question.
So basically, there are logging methods which are implemented by default within some of the applications. Like if you have implemented particular log of the application, then they can generate the results. They can put some of the loggings of the traffic that which user has visited your application at which time and from which IP address and what sort of activities they have done. So you can like configure these logging types on the servers and they can generate the report out of those. You can implement different BI tools or different analysis related tools to get that which application or which user traffic is potentially a threat to your application and what patterns they have implemented and what patterns they have followed to access your application and what kind of functions they have performed. So this way you can implement the log, which could be easily understandable to you.
Gotcha. All right, I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
All right. So now let's talk about client-side code injection attack that is known as cross-site scripting or XSS in short. The attacker aims to execute malicious scripts in a web browser of the victim by including malicious code in a legitimate web page or application. The actual attack occurs when the victim visits the web page with execute the malicious code. So talk about now preventing the cross-site scripting. You can say that at the point where user input is received, filter as strictly as possible based on what is expected or valid input. At the point where user controllable data is output in HTTP responses, encode the output to prevent it from being interpreted as active content. To prevent cross-site scripting in HTTP responses that are not intended to contain any HTML or JavaScript, you can use the content type or X content type option headers to ensure that browsers interpret the responses in the way you intend. So as a last thing, you can say you can use content security policy to reduce the severity of any vulnerability that still occurs pertaining to accesses. So information leakage allows an application to reveal sensitive data such as technical details of the application, developer comments, environments, or user-specific data. An attacker may use this sensitive data to exploit the target application, its hosting networks, or its users, you can say. Now we are talking about preventing the information leakage. So here are some of the steps. One of them is classified data processed, stored, or transmitted by an application. Identify which data is sensitive according to the privacy laws which are defined by your country, regulatory requirements, or business needs. Apply controls as per the classification. Do not store sensitive data unnecessarily, like discard it as soon as possible. Like you don't need to store the OTPs somewhere. You don't need to store the one-time passwords or so on, the keys somewhere. You have to just use them and then discard them. Encrypt all data in the transit with secure protocols such as TLS. Enforce encryption using directives like HTTP strict transport security. Disable caching for responses that contains the sensitive data. In this way, the user information will not be cached. That can be like very much vulnerable for any cyber criminal to use it. Store passwords using strong adaptive and salted hashing functions. So the next thing, which is cross-site request forgery, short as CSRF, is an attack that forces authenticated users to submit a request to a web application against which they are currently authenticated. An attacker's aim is to carrying out a CSRF attack is to force the user to submit a state-changing request. You can say example of these include submitting or deleting a record, submitting a transaction, purchasing a product even, changing a password, or sending a message to someone. Hence, it will make the verified user to submit a state-changing request for fulfilling their ill intentions. Preventing a cross-site request forgery, you can say in a nutshell, there are two methods. First, an anti-CSRF token, which is the type of server-side CSRF protection. It is random string that is only known to be the user's browser and the web application. Secondly, you can say that same site prevents the browser from sending the cookie along with the cross-site request. The main goal is to mitigate the risk of cross-origin information leakage. It also provides some protection against cross-site request forgery attacks. Possible values for the flag or none, lex, or strict. So that's it from my side. Is there any question which we can help or answer?
Yeah, did have one come in. It's more related to kind of the industry, or I guess industry vulnerabilities. So which industry is more prone to particular vulnerabilities, if there are any industries more prone?
All right, let's say that there are different type of vulnerabilities which we have listed, and there are different type of industries. We can analyze that all type of vulnerabilities or all type of attacks can happen to any type of industries, which includes transportation, financial services and insurance, healthcare, retail and economics, telecom, travel and hospitality. But if we talk about some statistics, then the cross-site scripting is more common in transportation related industries. Similarly, cross-site request forgery, that is more common in retail and e-commerce related. You can say that information leakage is very much common in telecom industry. There they have the bunch of data and so on. Similarly, these are some sort of mix and match.
Okay, great, thank you. Hopefully that answers the question.
So now thank you for your patience. It concludes from my end. Now I will hand over to Zira to go ahead and walk us through. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zohaib. So can we move on to next slide? Yeah. So now we shall try to analyze the steps which AlphaBOLD usually follows in the penetration testing process. So we basically execute 3 steps whenever we are conducting pen testing from small to large scale applications. First one is information gathering, which consists of scanning and mapping. Afterwards, we go for exploitation or attacking. And lastly, we prepare the password protected final report having vulnerabilities list to be patched to make your applications more secure.
Before you move on, yes. Zarak, I did have a question come in in regards to this, and it's how can you protect data during and after penetration testing?
Okay, yeah, that's a very concerned question, which mostly organizations ask before commencing. So, I mean, before commencing a penetration test, all the data associated with the software, I mean, must be carefully backed up, because the test data can affect the data to prove the software's vulnerability. Protecting data is a priority before and during and also after the penetration test. The data can be backed up by either storing copies in the cloud or directly into an external secure hard drive, or setting up private encryption. The whole idea is to have a replacement for your data in case of any damage. I hope this answers the question.
Great, hopefully that answers it. Thank you.
Can we move on to the next slide, please? So in information gathering process, we try to get information against the targeted systems. We usually spend almost 25 to 30% of the testing time on this phase. It's a fact that if we gather more information about the target, the more the probability to obtain relevant results. So some tools and techniques which AlphaBOLD considers on this step, I mean, for port scanning or extracting port informations, we use a map, and for extracting the list of files or information against the files which are available on the server, we use wget, and we use Google queries to find out the content which is publicly accessible but should not be publicly available. If you talk about the objectives of this phase, then the first one would be to discover the live host computer IP addresses and open ports of the victim. Second one would be we try to discover the services that are running on the host computer. Third one would be we try to discover the operating system and system architecture of the target. Next slide, please. Okay, so now if we further look into mapping, which is basically a phase of information gathering. In this phase, we explicitly view the website by looking at every page. We try to use and manipulate the application. There are some automated tools as well, which AlphaBOLD normally use based on pen testing requirements. Those can be burp suite and Paras proxy, and we can perform some amazing functions with those tools. I mean, like crawling a web application, launching an automatic scan, automating customized attacks, manipulating and iterating web requests, and analyzing application data randomness. Next slide, please. So after gathering the information, here comes the analyzing part, in which we critically analyze the entry points of the URL or application. Moreover, we also try to gather server-side information as well. For entry points, we will analyze every URL string up to the query string marker, every parameter submitted within the URL query string, every parameter submitted within the body of post request, every cookie, every other HTTP header that the application might process. Next slide, please. So if you talk about attacking the authentication, then I would try to explain the authentication first. It is a process of recognizing a user's identity. It is a mechanism of, associating an incoming request with a set of identifying credentials. So in attacking authentication, first of all, we need to see the technologies. that what are the technologies used for authentication mechanisms and which we can target. So for the technologies, we need to see if there are HTML forms are used. We need to see if it's multi-factor authentication is applicable or not. We need to see the physical tokens. We need to see the client SSL certificates and what kind of authentication is applicable. Is it HTTP or any other? Now we want to see that in authentication, what are the possible flaws which can be used to exploit, and see what will be the possible fixes against those flaws. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So here is the list of authentication design flaws and their possible fixes. So for bad or weak password, we should apply a strong credential policy. For brute forceable login, we should prevent it by applying CAPTCHA on the input forms. For vulnerable communications, log, monitor, and notify users if someone logs into the account. For password change logic, we should prevent credentials using SSH and hashing techniques. Next slide, please. So if we talk about attacking the session, and then session token is basically a piece of data that is used in network communication. So to identify a session, a series of related message exchanges. Session IDs, are often used to identify a user that has logged into a website. They can be used by an attacker to hijack the session and obtain potential privileges. So session is vulnerable if it has problems. For example, token weakness can be a problem. Session management mechanisms are often vulnerable to attack because tokens are generated in an unsafe manner that enables an attacker to identify the values of tokens that have been issued to other users. Meaningful token is also a problem. Some session tokens are usually created using a transformation of user's username or email address or other information associated with that person. The tokens should not be predictable as well. Some session tokens do not contain any meaningful data associating them with a particular user. They can be guessed because they contain sequences of patterns that allows an attacker to exploit from a sample of tokens to find other valid tokens recently issued by the application. There is also one concept of time dependency. Some web servers and applications employ algorithms to generate session tokens that use the time of generation as an input to the token's value. So it is also vulnerable. So token handling, in handling tokens, there can be multiple issues. No matter how effective your application is at ensuring the session tokens it generates do not contain any meaningful information and are not susceptible to analysis or prediction. Its session mechanism will be wide open to attack if those tokens are not handled carefully after generation. Next slide, please. So if we talk about access control, it is sometimes called authorization. It's how a web application grants access to content and functions to some users and not others. So these checks are performed after authorization and govern what authorized users are allowed to do. So it sounds like a simple problem, but it's trust me, it's insidiously difficult to implement correctly. There are basically two types of access privilege escalation. One is vertical and horizontal. If we talk about vertical, it usually occurs when a user can perform functions that his assigned roles do not permit him. If you take example, for instance, if an ordinary user can perform administrative functions, so this is the example of vertical privilege escalation. If you look into horizontal privilege escalation, it occurs when a user can view or modify resources to which he is not entitled. For instance, if you can use a webmail application to read others people's email, and the example would be if a payment clerk can process invoices for an organizational unit other than his own. So now to maintain access control, we need to make sure that we are not trusting users' data. Don't assume user access only linked pages. Evaluate access control for every object. Use application roles and manage access centrally. Next slide, please. So attacking application logic, this usually occurs, when user can exploit a flaw in the application state machine to gain access to a key resource. For example, a user may be able to bypass the payment step in the shopping checkout sequence. We can, divide the logic attacks in 3 categories with reference to business domain. First one would be e-shoplifting. E-shoplifting is basically a theft of merchant goods on the internet. Like this kind of shoplifting might seem harmless, as the shoplifter never communicates with the victim and performs the scam with a few keystrokes and clicks on the mouse. For instance, user is able to set your own price. You can set your negative prices and negative quantity of the items and so on. Next one is the shortening flaw. The short URLs can create security and privacy issues. The security issue caused by short URLs is a result of their shortness. So most short URLs are comprised of a root domain with a path of few letters and numbers. So try to avoid link to it. If you talk about the banking applications, then example would be, no check applied on transferring amount greater than 1,000. We can consider it as a logic flaw. There is logic is not properly handled at the backend. Some component changes negative amount to positive ones. Next slide, please. So now we will see that how we can avoid these logic flaws. So we can avoid them by following. We have to comment and document code and functionality, document assumptions and expectations, keep side effects in mind. Think about the big picture and always think different. So do we have any questions, Nick, as of now?
Yeah, I was just popping on here. We had one question come in. Do you have any penetration testing certifications?
Basically there are different security testing certifications like GXPN and Offensive Security Certified Professional, OSCP. Although in some cases certifications can be added advantage, however, further inquiries have proved that many candidates without any certification can be better than those with certificates. So it's better to dwell on asking a candidate for more details concerning carrying out the actual test.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So, after having this knowledge sharing session, we can conclude that despite of the firewalls, network security initiatives, and other implemented security technologies, we can somehow minimize the security threats, but not completely eradicate them. Because chance of programming errors and unintentional configurations remains there. So what's the best we can do is to enhance our security. Is by we can periodically conduct penetration testing, and AlphaBOLD will happily assist you in this. So lastly, just a clear message with reference to stats, which Zohaib has shown that if you are on the web, you are in danger. So I guess that's it from my side.
You're trying to scare people here. They're on the web right now, so you are in danger right now. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that. Thank you everybody for attending today. Hopefully you're able to kind of show you how important pen testing is to make sure you guys are secure, because there are a lot of vulnerabilities out there, and I think every week we see in the news someone else gets ransomware or hijacked or malware, and they're paying millions of dollars to keep their data secure or just even get their data back. So we do want to help you guys out. So if you guys are kind of worried about your security, or you want to just make sure that you are completely secure, or at least as secure as you can be, we would love to talk with you. We would love to just review your existing testing processes, what tools you're using. We can make some recommendations as far as what your next step should be to elevate your security. And then we can also train you up on how to do pen testing yourself and make sure that you guys stay up to date and stay secure for the entirety of the year and the years to come. So if you go to the next slide, should be, yeah, our contact information. So if you are interested in that workshop, it would be a free 1-hour thing where we would just sit down with you, review what you're doing, and make some suggestions and see maybe if there's an opportunity to partner up on creating some security or a higher level of security in your organization. Please reach out to us. We have our sales at alphabold.com email right there, phone number is there. We will be reaching out to you once this is concluded. With the slide deck, we will send out the recording. I think GoToWebinar also sends out the recording. So that way, if you did want to share it with any of your colleagues, you can do that. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. That wraps everything up. I don't see any other questions coming through. So you got 4 minutes of your day back. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.